we're all made out of the same building blocks, out of the same substance that all of reality is made of. Even God and Goddess are made out of light and love. And we're also made out of light and love, except that we're like in such a low dimension. We're in the lowest dimensions of existence.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Onion Soup. And today I'm with a wonderful guest, Mr. Daniel the Healer. How are you doing today, Daniel?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you. Hello to you. And thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for coming on. So I'm really excited to dive into everything you do. So first, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I'm a holistic intuitive energy healer. At least that's what I'm doing full time now. Otherwise, I'm just a intrepid explorer of the world of reality and an adventurer in this earthly reality.
Also, I love that. I feel like that's what most of us are. We're all of us, really. We're all just really explorers traveling throughout this world we call real.
This super great illusion that we're in.
Exactly. So one thing I really want to dive into right off the bat is with your work, you do what you call psychic chiropractic and psychic surgery. Can we talk about that?
Yes. So there's different perceptions of what psychic surgery is. Psychic surgery is most well known about the way they do it in the Philippines, but that's all sleight of hands. The way I develop, the way I determine, or the way I define it is that I go into your psyche and I surgically change things around. The very first impression that I had of myself when I became intuitive. I wasn't always intuitive. I was very left brain, very logical, linear. And of course, that's only half the life. The very first impression when I became intuitive of my own situation is I found myself with ropes around my hands. I was bound, which was an imagery that, though defined my life the way I was. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. I was stuck. And so I got a sword in my imagination. I got a sword and I cut open the rope and I set myself free.
Let's
And that
go
was
back
like,
to when you first found that.
that
Uh,
was just to finish my sentence. That
yeah,
was
sorry
my
about that.
very first psychic surgery.
Interesting. So the psychic surgery was you really cutting the bounds of your own psyche, really, to open up to your awareness.
Correct. And I was like in my late 30s.
Oh, interesting. Why do you think this tends to happen to people in their 30s? I feel like that's been the common thing. People get into their 30s, mid to late, and become more aware of their own intuitive abilities.
Because basically, first of all, you have to grow up. You child, adolescent, young adult, you only develop responsibility circuits in your brain in your early 20s.
Mm.
And now, with all that you think, oh, I'm great, I know how to do everything, I'm the king of the hill and stuff like that, the young adult, then it takes them a while to realize hey, oh no, life is not quite like that. Now, also, there's another element, and that is Saturn.
Mm.
Saturn has a 26-year pattern around the sun. And astrologically, at 26, you go through your Saturn return, meaning Saturn goes back to the same place where it was when you were born.
Mm.
And only now you start to have perspective because you're starting a second cycle.
Mm.
So these two influences that before your early 20s, you don't have any sense of responsibility, and that in your mid 20s, you start a second cycle doing the same thing again. And only if you do it the second time do you gain perspective. So that's when people start to wake up and, oh, there must be more than this. And some of them find their spirituality. And then I only found mine in my early 30s.
Wow, that's really fascinating because when I was 26, that was the year I left the military and decided to do something different with my life. And I was still doing some of the old things. I was a heavy drinker back then. And I was still doing that a little bit, but it really started to drop off very quickly as I became more aware of what I was doing in the moment.
You're right. Perspective. You somehow something clicked in you.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
It is, it's really cool. It is funny because I usually tell a lot of people, especially my friends who are in their 20s, I say, "It's not until about your mid-20s when you really start to kind of change." You pick a direction, rather, I should say. You either decide to continue on the same path or you decide to do something different because you didn't like the way your life was going before.
Yes, correct.
So I wanna go back to when you first noticed the ropes around your hands. What was going on in your life, and how did you perceive those ropes in your mind's eye?
I really don't quite remember all the things that went on. That's 30, 40 years ago. But it was what stood out is that it was my very first impression of something non-physical,
Mm,
and that I had the awareness and the fortitude, so to speak, to realize that this was an imagery and that with my thought patterns, with my imagination, I could go and change that imagery and that it would make a difference in my life. I'll give you some other examples. I've I've been doing this for years, so there's a lot of input, but maybe you find yourself in a dungeon or you and this all of this are like just imagery that represent it's not literal, it's figuratively.
mm,
And different people have different imageries. But I had this client and she was in this dungeons. She was in with shackles, like in a medieval castle. Psychically, I brought in a wrecking ball
mm,
and I completely destroyed the dungeon. I brought in bulldozers. I did all what it took to set her free.
mm,
And psychic surgery, yes, many times I use scalpels and syringes and sutures and things like that. But I use other things like construction equipment and heavy duty equipment and whatever is needed to change the situation, to create a new imagery in my imagination.
mm.
And the reason I'm making more emphasis on the term imagination is that, yes, we live in 3D. We have depth, width, and height, the three dimensions that we have in the physical world. 3D is floating in time space. That's the fourth dimension, time space. Outside of the fourth dimension, there is no time space anymore. You go into the eternal now, into the timeless. But the fifth dimension is will and imagination. So if you can actually go into imagination and shift something around in that imaginary realm, then it will come back through time space and come into the physical. So it's extremely powerful because you can alter people's lives by, in let's call it interfering or manipulating their psyche, which I do with psychic surgery. That's what I define as psychic surgery.
Interesting. So it really doesn't matter if the client was in a dungeon or trapped in maybe a dark room or something like that. The theme of the issue would have been that the client was trapped and enclosed somewhere. So either way, however it appeared in your mind, your goal was to break down those walls.
Correct. And
Wow.
like I said, it's a representation, it's an imagery.
Mm,
And you may have something, and I imagine it, and I tune into you, and I see certain imagery. Somebody else may tune into you for the very same circumstance and may, excuse me, get a totally different imagery.
mm. I think that's really important to point out because a lot of times when we talk to different psychics, one psychic might see one thing in their mind and the other one might see another. And someone would say there's a discrepancy there. And it's really not. It's just that the overall theme, the overall idea is the same, but the interpretations might be slightly different.
Correct. The universe talks to you, but the universe doesn't talk to you in English. The universe talks to you in energy.
Yeah.
And so we absorb the energy through our chakras. We absorb the energies or through our third eye and then interpret that energy that goes through our nervous system. It goes through our emotional body. It goes through our mental body. It goes through all, ultimately, then will be translated into either words, knowing, or images.
Mm,
But even your dreams, yes, there's dream language. If you're in a pool, then you're in your emotions. There's a few things that are, but I can have a dream where I see one thing and you can have another dream where you see something else. Yet to us individually, it means the same.
mm. And so how do you get to a place to say someone's just waking up to their intuition and they're starting to get more imagery in their mind's eye? What would you say to somebody who's trying to break down that imagery and that symbology?
It's like learning a language. You work with it. You assign certain meanings to certain things. In my dream, I grow a lot. I go to new places. I become new. I reach certain plateaus and then I go and continue. If I'm close to a plateau, I will generally board an airplane and fly somewhere and then disembark the airplane and I'm at a new place. So for me specifically, I have instituted that if I go on an airplane and sometimes I just go to the airport to check in and then I wake up. I was like, oh, I'm close to going to a new place. I'm close to being different. And then maybe 3, 4 nights later, I actually get into the airplane. And maybe another week later, I'm actually landing. And so it's just a feedback because I created this. So if you, for instance, remember your dreams, and then have certain themes that appear on a regular basis, then you assign meaning to that. And then once you assign meaning, then it's like a new language. And the same thing with your psychic impressions. And you may either see it, hear it, or you may just, if you're a kinesthetic, you may just know it. And that, which is the most difficult because when you see and hear it, there's a quote unquote logical way for the material that you perceive to come in. But when you just know it, I didn't know it. Now I know it. Gee, how did this happen? You can have a lot of doubts. But if you then have certain experiences and you assign meaning to each individual uh, impression or meaning or whatever happens to you, then eventually you quote unquote create this new language with which you can relate to your world. So it's a lot of practicing. It's a lot of you making choices. It's a lot of you deciding, oh, this means that and that means the other. And you may want to connect with somebody who, and there may be books out there of people who talking about their own experience. And you can say, oh, yeah, this makes sense. When you saw a train riding by, then that means that the world is moving, or I'm just making this up. But take on other people's meanings that why fully create your own when there's possibility that you can work with meanings that are already established in our collective.
It's like, why recreate the wheel when there's so many people who've gone through this before us?
Yes.
So when you work with a client and you're doing psychic surgery, so you talked about things as far as a wrecking ball, but you also mentioned the scalpel. So what type of minute surgeries do you do with your client?
Okay, like a wrecking ball I explained to you, like I broke the dungeon down. There's there's a lot of, how should I best say it? There's a lot of stuff that you create from the inside, and there's some stuff that comes from the outside. The outside stuff generally is destructive. It's like a curse. It's certain situations, attachments, weapons. So if on some psychic level, somebody, yeah, first of all, people are not really always aware of what they're doing. If you drive in traffic and you cut somebody off, and the driver that you cut off all of a sudden, oh, good Lord, and in his mind say, may you rot in hell. And if he has just in that moment the right intensity, the right alignment, and you are, quote unquote, for some other reasons. Maybe you were scared, you didn't see him, and then you, oh my God, and you were unprotected, you were vulnerable in the moment. Then that intensive thing can attach to you,
Mm.
and it can, quote unquote, become a curse. Now, curses are really very different. Some curses have tentacles. So if I are removing somebody's curse, and they have tentacles, then I may have to go out, and sometimes they're like wrapped around your spine, and I start pulling and it's not giving. And so I need to go and cut these tentacles off. I would use a scalpel.
Mm.
I would also, sometimes you were attacked by a psychic weapon. You have a spear or a sword that goes through you, and I pull it out, and then it has all kinds of debris, and I have to go and clean up the wound. And I use lukewarm water, and then I have to fill up the space. I fill it up with light, and then there is a scar, and then you suture the scar just like a surgeon would do. And then, of course, because that can be rather painful, I first give you anesthesia, psychic anesthesia. But in my mind, I use a little syringe, and I go to this little vial and I fill it up, and then I go and add this around the wound so that I can suture it. Then I use the very same thing, that little round needle with the silk thread attached to it already. And I use the same thing a surgeon uses, which is these clamps, so that because it's too small to use your hand. So with a clamp, I go in, I pull it through, I make the knot, I cut it, scissors, scalpel, whatever. So that's why I call the psychic surgery. Whatever is necessary, whatever it takes to heal a situation, however that situation may have shown up. It may show up on the physical, the mental, the emotional, or in the spiritual.
Interesting, interesting. So when you're doing this, there's a there's an energetic exchange that takes place.
Very
So
much so.
how how do you feel when you're doing it? And then how does your client feel during and after?
Sometimes it depends where they're coming from. Some of them have absolutely they don't feel anything
Mm.
because they don't have the sensitivity. See, we have 12 senses, of which we know the five familiar ones.
Mm,
the taste, the touch, the smell, vision, and the hearing. The, but you have seven more senses. And because in our physical world, we are so enamored of the five senses, science is all that which you can see, sense, you can observe. If you can't observe it, science doesn't believe in it. So we're very much involved in our five physical senses. We're so much involved with it that we tend to discourage children who are born with all 12 senses to, oh, these are just imaginary. And you will, when you grow up, you won't have imaginary friends anymore. And by the way, these are your spirit helpers and all that. And yeah, don't make this up. This has no value, we're being told. And so we forget, we lose it. So if they lost it, then they will not feel anything. But if they're in tune, like I worked with an autistic boy not too long ago, and his chakra were broken. Autism is generally a matter that they're so sensitive, that they're so overloaded with stuff that they have to retreat and go into their shell. It's like a snail, and they also don't have any. Generally, that comes from a point of view that they don't have any barrier between them and the rest of the world. And if you don't have any aura boundaries that can happen, then you don't know what is you and what is the world. You take everything on.
mm,
And so I quote unquote recreate it is aura boundary, which I do by creating first with chicken wire. I start create the form and then I put them in it and then I plaster them and onto the chicken wire, a new form and a new shape. And then I remove the chicken wire and then I would make that skin that I put on there alive. And now they have a new aura boundary so they can be protected from their world. And he felt every step of the way. And he's functioning way better than before we worked together, which, I mean, to me, that's a miracle. I still don't fully comprehend the magnitude that I can go and in my imagination with imagery that I create in my own mind, that I also learned how to activate my heart chakra and I know how to send a healing love stream from me to somebody else, but then take this imagery and I superimpose it onto my healing love stream and I send it.
mm,
And they, on the other hand, on the other side, they actually get it and they decipher it and they put it into action.
mm.
They're doing the healing. I just send them the correct imagery. And it changes their lives. Literally, the guy can function now. He can go back to school. He couldn't. He was so overwhelmed. He can go back to school and he has a more positive outlook on his daily life. One session.
Wow, wow. I love how you're the facilitator of the energy, a facilitator of the transformation. I think that's very important as well. I think when people look at light workers and healers, it's really just like a surgeon, right? A surgeon helps your body to heal. A surgeon puts your body back together in a certain way, but it's truly up to your body to do the healing. So it's really you doing the healing
Correct.
work. So we were talking about the senses. What are the other 7 senses?
Okay, so the life is one, voice, movement, warmth, and substance. And we're not talking about, yeah, this has substance. No, we're talking about, oh, you're reading a book. This has a lot of substance.
Yeah. The energy behind things?
The energy behind things,
Mm,
warmth, not like temperature warm, but oh, this is such a warm and cuddly person, or what a cold hearted bitch.
yeah.
Movement. Oh, I'm moved to tears. Voice. What is it trying to express? Not voice the vocal cords. You can be in a silent protest and you're still voicing your discontent.
Mhm.
And like life, how much light does this have? Does this pen have life? Yeah, a little, not much, but it does. Everything has light, everything has life. And now it was interesting, and I'm sorry, I want to interrupt here a little bit, but when I saw about you, and I chose the 20-minute one, it said you can talk about anything you want. I do want to say, because talking about this pen that has light and life, I do want to say that we're all divine. We're all made out of the same building blocks, out of the same substance that all of reality is made of. Even God and Goddess are made out of light and love. And we're also made out of light and love, except that we're like in such a low dimension. We're in the lowest dimensions of existence, one, two, and three, depth, width, and height, that we tend to forget because here it's so dense that is like quote unquote crystallized. When you have too much salt in water, you take salt and you put it in water and you boil it in all the solids, and then it gets colder and colder. All of a sudden, the excess crystal that the water can't hold anymore is starting to form crystals again. And we, in our physical reality, are the same thing. We're crystallized light and life.
Yeah.
And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because we're all divine, yet in this reality, we're made to believe that we're insignificant, that we, oh, you're just one person out of 8 billion. How can you make any difference? No, we all make a difference. We all matter. We all are divine. And yes, we may not be as advanced as God and Goddess, but we're on the way. So we are gods and goddesses in training. And as such, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because right now we're in extremely chaotic times. It's so much chaos. There's so much stuff going on out there. At least 90% of the world, of the people living in it, are barely making it. They're in terror, they're in fear. And so we're in this extreme soup because it's all around us. And so the message that I really want to bring here is that need to keep your resonance high. You need to own that you're divine, and you need to surround yourself in love, in light every day. And you need to own that you are divine, and which means that if you run into some issue, into some challenge, into some things that comes up to you, that you don't knee jerk react to it, but that you take a moment and you say, oh, but I'm a divine person. And as a divine being, how would I respond to this now? And so it needs to become a day to day activity. But if you're in your divinity, all this crap out there is not going to touch you. It's not, you're above the fray. And that was the main message that I wanted to bring forth today. And to that, specifically for that purpose, I hold weekly free energy healing sessions online where I pump people up with light so that they have, not only are they doing it themselves, but they have external help to keep their resonance high.
Mm. Wow, I love that. And I agree with you. We're all divine. We're all beings of just light and love. But how does somebody who's truly going through, let's say, the dark night of the soul or in the darkest points of their lives, how do they get started with holding that light closer within them? Because they are the light, but how do they get started with really feeling that?
The best way to do is just to imagine yourself standing or sitting or lying there and build a bubble around you and fill it up with light. It's like you're standing on a dark screen, on a dark stage, and the you just you went there, you're part of a play, but you're okay, I'm gonna go over to the theater and I'm gonna stand on the stage and I'm gonna see how this feels.
Mm,
And nobody else is there, and the theater isn't dark. You just maybe the door is open in the distance, and there's maybe a little sunlight. So you stand on the stage, and then unbeknownst to you, the guy who handles the lights is there too, and he turns on the spotlight, and now all of a sudden you're in the middle of the stage, and there's an enormous spotlight,
mm,
and you do the same thing with yourself. You turn on in your imagination. And that's what I just explained earlier, how imagination is such a powerful tool. In your imagination, you turn on the light, you create this bubble around you, and you fill that up with light. You can, when you go in your car, you put the car around, you fill the all around the car, a big bubble of light. So you're not only this automobile that drives down the road, you're this automobile in a bubble of light that drives down the road. And things are going to be different when you're in the light.
I
So
love
that's where you start.
Yeah, I love that when you first started bringing up the stage, my first thought was Shakespeare, all the world's a stage, and its men and women are just merely players. And for anybody that's ever been onto a stage and had the spotlight directly on them, you can physically feel the warmth from that spotlight touching your body. And
Yeah,
same thing,
I have two spotlights here.
if it is so warm. It's same thing, like, say, getting into the car with the bubble. No matter how hot outside it is, it's always warmer inside the car. So there's energy that's within that space. So when you put the bubble, if you feel your own auric field around you, put a bubble around you, just imagine that heat, that energy is encapsulating you and it's filling you up, it's warming you.
Yeah. And it makes a difference.
Yeah, it does. It truly does.
Yeah. So that's where you begin. And then you, if you've never been involved with spirituality, you need to start reaching out to the other side. There's nothing faster for you to grow in your spirituality than to have an ongoing dialogue with the other side.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. So we were talking earlier, or you mentioned the chakras. So how does an individual find balance within their chakras? And then how can you use the balance in your chakras to connect with your spirit guides?
So the chakras are your energetic microphones and loudspeakers to your energetic world. Two people meet up. They've never seen each other before. You go to a party and, oh, by the way, you need to meet my best friend, so and oh, come on, John, here is Buddy, and Buddy, this is John. And oh, okay. Nice meeting you. And so here now you've just been introduced to this stranger.
Mm,
On some level, within 10 to 15 seconds, you know exactly who they are. So, at some level, is your energy field. In your energy field, you know who they are. Why? Because they have chakras. They, quote unquote, project their energies into their world. You have energies. You project your energies into your world. And so, your chakras, which are not only the loudspeakers, but also the microphones to your energetic world, reads their energy. And okay, I know. Now, if you're not in tune with it, then tough pippy. But if you're in tune with it, you immediately know, is this a nice person? Can I trust this person? Or do they ultimately want to swindle me out of money and they're just being nicey? If you have, it takes a while to learn, to relearn, not to learn, to relearn because you gave it up. Sometimes even under duress, under threat of punishment. Oh, If you do this one more time, yeah, and then, okay, I have to let it go. I have to let it go. I have to forget about it. So you forgot about it. But now it's very sad. It's especially for men, where men are being told that they have to be tough. And being intuitive, quote unquote, is women's stuff. You're being sissy if you do this. So you have to toughen up. You have to let go of all this immaterial stuff and not. And so they're not equipped. They, they simply don't have it.
Mm,
It's much more, even though it's harder initially, it's much more to be quote unquote an empath and sensitive than to be tough. Ultimately, the tough people will fade, whereas the sensitive people, the ones that are in tune, that are empathetic to the energies of what is going on, will thrive and make it.
man.
So you need to make a conscious choice to be more empathetic. Our society doesn't encourage us to grow up. All you look at all the macho movies, there it's all hate and revenge and who's the king of the hill kind of thing. You need to grow up and you need to let that go. And so it's a process. I can't really say what is the best way to begin. I guess the best way to begin is to make a choice that where you're at is not really functioning anymore. And if you need to keep a facade so that you fit in, then you keep it as a facade. But under the facade, in secret, you're trying to expand, you're trying to become more, you're trying to become conscious, you're trying to learn, to grow, to take responsibility, and to become an empowered person.
And wow, I love that. And all of that is just about, like you said earlier, stepping into your divinity and growing within your own divine nature as we increase the level and amount of light that we carry within ourselves. Because truly, as we start to reach out to others, as you said, our fields, and then we interact with others, the more light we have, the more light we can give, and the more light that we can spread upon others.
Yes. And the more light you give, the more the universe will recognize that you're a giver of light and the more light you receive.
Yes, there's a quote, but it's one of the true laws of the universe when we talk about the law of attraction. Is more so you get back as much as you give. You whatever you put out is what you get
Yeah.
back.
You reap what you sow.
Yeah, you reap what you sow. So the more positivity you give, the more positivity you get from the universe. So that way you can give more positive, more light. Same thing happens if you push out negativity, whether it be conscious or unconscious.
Yes. And unfortunately, there's a lot of unconscious and subconscious negativity that goes around. So if you keep your resonance high, you're not subject to receiving this because it sounds really weird, but I know for a fact I'm not going to have a car accident. I'm not going to get robbed. I'm not going to get mugged. I'm not going to happen to be at an intersection where there's a mugging going on and there's a stray bullet finding me. All that stuff because I have so much light that those elements that function in darkness, they don't recognize, they don't see me. I'm not being seen. I'm not on their radar. Same with the government.
Mhm.
If you're in fear, you're on the government radar. If you're not in fear, you're not on their radar.
Yeah, 100% true. When I started to grow in my own awareness, I started to notice a lot of things and people a lot of my life. And that's just part of the cause when we talk about spiritual growth and being on this journey. And when you're going through it, it feels weird and it looks weird because you see people literally start falling out of your life. Your friends, certain family members just stop interacting with you. But then once that space opens up, you have so many more people that resonate with you on that same vibrational plane. And you don't have to deal with that nonsense and the BS. Not saying that those people were bringing that nonsense and BS, but like you said, that negativity, that darkness simply can't see you anymore.
Right. And so it's sad. I have many clients. It's sad that sometimes your physical family doesn't turn out to be part of your spiritual family, but you need to, if somebody's not on your wave, then you need to let them go. You need to come to some closure, some soft closure. I wish you all the best. I send you much love. I appreciated the the play you played in my play. I appreciated you playing this role that I needed that got me to who I am now. But at this point, I don't need this role played anymore. And like in a series of a TV or series, after the fourth session, someone dies, having nerve, and therefore doesn't appear on the show anymore. So you, even though they quote unquote physically don't die, but for you, they die. So you may want to have a little funeral for them. You may want to put them to rest somewhere nicely and put flowers on their grave and thank you and have a nice journey wherever you go. But you need to do that peacefully.
Interesting. It's funny because I was just talking to another guest about something similar, and we were talking about doing that not just with people, but with addictions and just things that simply don't serve you anymore in your life. Letting them go with peace and saying that, I appreciate what you've taught me along the way, but I'm ready to let that part of my life go and move on to something bigger and better.
Uh-huh. Correct. Now, it's unfortunate. We love change, but we don't like chaos.
Mm,
Yet every change is preceded and followed by chaos. So many times we will not allow ourselves to go through change because we're too afraid of the unknown, of the, oh my God, what is this? What can happen? I don't have control over this. For the control freaks, they may not be able to go through what you just said because the circumstances around it are just simply too overwhelming and perceived as too unpredictable and even though they're not.
yeah. One thing that I tell people is that the most beautiful flowers typically come after the strongest storm. But Daniel, that's pretty much all the time we have for today. Is there anything that you would like to say to the audience before we go?
These are very turbulent times. The reason this is because the old is dying and the new has not arrived yet, but we're moving towards an extraordinary, brilliant, gorgeous, heart centered future. So don't lose hope. Keep your resonance high. And if you indeed wish to participate in my free healings, then go to my website, ihealyourpain.com, and register, and you'll be able to at least twice a week. I do it every Wednesday at 10 a.m. and every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. On that website, ihealyourpain.com, you log in, you create an account, and then you can participate as many times free of charge anywhere in the world and let yourselves be filled with light.
Wow. Thank you so much, Daniel, for coming on to the show. I truly enjoyed this conversation. And I'm excited to learn more about the other senses. I knew that there were two others. I didn't know that there were seven others. So that'd be fun research for me. And I want to thank everybody for tuning into this episode of Onion Soup. Please have a blessed rest of your day and have a great one. Bye.
Take care. Bye bye, everybody.